There, everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, good evening.
Okay, thanks, Liz, for the feedback. So please don't forget to turn your cameras on as we set everything up for today's class. Please don't forget your cameras. Okay, guys, aren't you gonna turn your cameras on? There's only one person. Okay, thanks, Camila. What about the rest of you guys? All right, thanks, Alejandro, too. Maria Rene? Okay, guys, well, so today's our first class. We're gonna start with the actual content of this course. And as I was telling you yesterday, we are going to be starting this week with the speaking section, right? We said that we were going to start with the speaking section. So remember that each section of the test is different, right? Each section lasts a different amount of time, contains different questions. So we are looking at the speaking section this week, today and tomorrow, to be more specific. So in the speaking section, you guys will have a total of 4 different questions. 4 questions in the speaking section. It's the shortest section in terms of time. In total, you will have approximately 20 or 25 minutes here. You will spend 20 or 25 minutes in the speaking section. And you have a total of 4 different questions. Question 1, question 2, 3, and 4. We're gonna also call them tasks. Okay, so if I ever say task 1, task 2, task 3, you know that I mean question. Now, in the speaking section, you guys will have both independent and integrated questions. Does anyone know what that means by any chance? Independent, integrated, any ideas? Well, the difference between an independent and an integrated question is that when you have the integrated questions, you're supposed to integrate different skills. So for the integrated questions of the speaking section, that means question 2, 3, and 4, you guys are going to summarize something that they give you. So they will give you a text for you to read, they will make you hear an audio file, and you have to summarize that. But in the independent questions, they won't give you anything, and you just have to talk about yourself, about your opinion on something. So that is the difference between independent and integrated, okay? Now, as I told you yesterday, today and tomorrow we are going to be working on the last question of the speaking section. That means that we're starting here in question 4 of the speaking section. Okay, guys? That's what we're going to be doing today and tomorrow. And then at the end of the course, we'll go back to the speaking section and we'll see the other questions as well. So don't worry, we're going to cover everything. But we are going to start in question 4. Is that okay so far? Does anyone have any questions? Okay, guys. So I was also telling you a little bit about this yesterday. I said that the reading and listening sections are always multiple choice, right? So your answers are right or are wrong. There's no other option. But here in the speaking, what happens is your answers, you're going to have to speak to answer the questions. That means that they will record what you say. They will record your response, and they will evaluate that response. Now, there is never going to be an answer that is wrong and a one that is right. There's no such thing here in the speaking section. So in order for you guys to understand what they want you to do, what you need to do to get a top score, and in order for you to evaluate yourselves when you're practicing, you need to understand how they are going to evaluate your responses. So we're going to talk about that now. If you guys look up if you search TOEFL speaking rubrics, the first thing that pops up, the first result, is a PDF that is published by the ETS. So this is official. And they basically give you the criteria, they explain to you exactly what they want for you to get a good score. So you have a description for the independent speaking and another one for the integrated questions, okay? But I'm gonna summarize this for you, so I'm gonna send you the link if you guys wanna see it, if you wanna check it out. First of all, they won't score your responses from 0 to 30, as you may be thinking. They don't do that. What they do is they evaluate your responses on a scale from 0 to 4. So you can have a level 4 response, a level 3 response, a level 2. It's like ranges, levels. And depending on what level you get, they will weight your score. That means that your final score is going to be a conversion somehow. For example, if you have a level 4 response, that means that you can get from 25 to 30. If you have a level 3, you can get from 20 to 25. So depending on the score that you get here is going to be your final score. But let's talk about what they say in that PDF. I'm going to summarize it for you guys. What do they want from your responses? So they are basically going to evaluate your responses based on three different things, three different criteria. The first one is topic development, which is related to the content of your response. This is what you say, the content of your response. So for example, we have whether you fulfill the task or not, task fulfillment. Does anybody know what fulfill means? It basically means completing, right? When you fulfill a task, that means that you have actually answered the question. You're doing what they are asking you to do in the question successfully, right? So in order for you to fulfill the task, to answer the question properly, your response needs to make sense. It needs to be logical. It needs to be coherent. It also needs to be concise. That means that you should try to avoid being redundant or repetitive. One thing that I've seen a lot from students is in the speaking section, they give you a certain amount of time to speak, right? So they can give you 1 minute to speak. So some students finish their responses, finish saying everything that they know and they remember in like 30 seconds. And then since they don't know what to do during the rest of the response, they don't know what to do the other 30 seconds they have left, they start repeating the same ideas. Is that a good idea? No. You don't have to repeat the same ideas over and over again because you're going to be redundant. And that's something that they don't want, right? They want your response to be concise, to be just the amount of words that you need, right? Don't over-explain things that don't need an explanation either, okay? And obviously, the way that you manage your time is also important. Now, they don't say that you need to complete the 60 seconds that they will give you of your response. But what they do say is that your idea should be well developed and well supported. Support and development is another thing they want. And this basically means that your response has certain depth, that you're not just saying things superficially, but you're explaining them with appropriate details, with appropriate examples, explanations, justifications. So you need to explain and develop your ideas. You can't just leave them there hanging, right? It has to be well developed. So a response that is well developed will take the exact amount of time that they give you. So the way that you manage your time says something about the content of your response as well. Because if for some reason you finish your response in 20 seconds when you had 60, that's impossible, right? If you finished before, it's because you left something that you needed to say. And if you've ran out of time, that means that you haven't summarized the ideas really well. So you have to create a balance, and we're going to work on that. And finally, they want your ideas to be well connected, to be well structured. So your response needs to have an academic structure, and your ideas need to be well connected. They need to flow easily, you know? How do you make your ideas flow and connect them? You use transitions or connectors, right? You need to use the appropriate transitions. We're going to talk about that as well when we get to the templates. And that's the content of your response. That's 1 out of 3. Now, the second big thing they want is delivery. Obviously, this is speaking, so it's not just about what you say, but the way you say it as well, how you say it. So when I say delivery, they obviously want somebody that's fluent. And when I say fluent, I don't mean somebody that sounds like a native speaker. You don't have to sound like a native speaker in order to get a good score, not at all. You don't even have to like worry about having an accent. It's totally fine to have an accent, you know, because the English language is spoken in so many places that everybody has an accent. It's impossible to get rid of an accent. However, you do need to speak in a way that the listener, the person who's listening to your response, can easily understand what you're saying. So when you're speaking, I shouldn't have any problems in understanding you. I shouldn't have to do any effort in order to understand what you're saying. If I have to make some effort, then that means that you're not speaking the way that you should. You know, you're not being pronouncing the words correctly, you're not intonating your ideas, you're not putting the right stress in the correct words, you're not articulating well. All of that matters. Intelligibility basically means how clear your response is, how easy to understand you are. And obviously, you're not supposed to make too many pauses because you will waste time and you will show that you're not fluent. It's better if you don't use too many filler words, and it's better if you don't use filler words in Spanish. So if you guys are struggling with that, I will let you know so that you work on that. It's hard, but it's possible. You know, I've helped many students get rid of those filler words like no. So those things are something that you need to get rid of. And that's it. That's pretty much delivery, how you speak. And finally, the third element is language use, which is related to your vocabulary and your grammar. Now, this is one mistake that so many students make. When I say vocabulary, I'm not asking you guys to look for the fanciest words out there and try to use them in your responses when you speak. That's a terrible idea. When I say vocabulary, I just want you to use the appropriate vocabulary. That means that if your response or if the question has to do with business, for example, if your question is business related, then you need to use business words, right? You cannot say when people buy things from stores, let's say, it would be better if you say when consumers make purchases, for example, or when consumers buy items or buy products from companies, right? Uh, so you have to use the appropriate words for the task. That's what I mean with vocabulary. You need to also be natural. So don't force yourself to use words that you don't know how to use, because that will end up sounding weird. So it's better to be natural. And obviously, range that has to do with how wide your vocabulary is. But again, I don't think that you guys will need to like learn too many words. You just need to learn the correct words in terms of the context. And finally, grammar, which is pretty much the same as vocabulary. You're obviously not supposed to make so many grammar mistakes because that can lower your score. But it's okay if you make one or two, no problem. You know, nobody speaks. I mean, there may be some people, right, that speak correctly, but even native speakers make grammar errors. So it's okay if you guys make one or two grammar errors, no problem. The problem is when you repeat the same mistake over and over again. So if you guys have problems with conjugating the verbs in the third person, they will know. They will realize that you have that problem and that can affect your score. But if you just make one mistake conjugating one verb, then that's not a problem, right? But if you continuously make the same error, then yes, it's a pattern. And finally, showing grammar variety basically means if you guys want a score that, I don't know, if you want a score that corresponds to a B1, then you need to show that you have B1 grammar, right? That you can use the structures that are taught in B1. But if you want like a C1 score, you want 100 and above, then you're probably gonna need to use more grammar structures. You're gonna need to use more grammar, more tenses, conditional sentences, and so forth. So it depends. To be honest, in the speaking section, I don't think it's necessary to force yourself to do anything. So I won't really say much about that. In the writing, we will see because it's easier to include certain grammar points in the writing. But here in the speaking, just be natural. That's better than forcing yourself to use grammar and vocabulary you don't know. Okay, guys, and that's it. I'm sorry that I know that I've spoken for too long, but I think this is really important because this is how you are gonna practice. And when you're practicing, you're gonna ask yourself, am I doing all of this? How was my vocabulary? How was my grammar? How was my pronunciation? How was my how did I support my ideas well? Did I connect them well? You're gonna ask yourself those things. So, is this okay, guys? Do you have any questions about this? Anything at all? Okay, guys, great. So if there are no questions, then I think we can go right off to question 4. Now we're gonna start seeing question 4 of the speaking section, the last one. The format is very simple, you will see. The format, I would say, is the simplest of them all. Basically, what you guys will do for this question, for question 2, is just listen to an audio file and then summarize that audio file. That's what you're gonna do. You're gonna listen to a university lecture. Does anyone know what a lecture is?
Exposición.
Exactly, yes. Perfect, yeah. When a lecture, exactly, it's like the development of a topic, right? Like a presentation. Now in this case, when I say university lecture, I mean a university class. So this is gonna be, you're gonna be hearing a university teacher, but what do we call university teachers? What's the right word? Do we call them teachers? We call them professors, right? So you guys are gonna be hearing a university professor explain an academic topic. So when I say academic, I mean something on the sciences. We're gonna talk about the topics later, but it will be academic. It's something, it's like you were part of a class, an American class, and you're just listening to a lecture there. So you're hearing your professor explain a topic. Okay, guys? This lecture is usually 2 minutes long, approximately, right? I'm not giving you an exact number. So you will listen to this lecture, and after you listen to the lecture, you get the question, and the question will ask you to summarize the lecture. After you get the question, you get 20 seconds to prepare your response. So you can do whatever you want during those 20 seconds. What you do during these 20 seconds is, I mean, we're going to talk about that in a bit. It depends on every student. And then after you have your 20 seconds to prepare, you need to start speaking and summarizing the lecture, and they will record your response. You will have a timer for all of these, so don't worry about measuring your time. You will have the timer on your screen and the question on your screen. So, is that okay so far? Do you guys have any questions on the format? Okay, guys. So, let's just start then looking at an example. Okay, guys? All right. So I am going to play the lecture and I want you guys to take notes. All right? I want you to obviously pay attention to the content, but at the same time, you need to take notes. In the TOEFL test, you guys will be able to take notes throughout the entire TOEFL test. That means that you can take notes in the listening, in the speaking, in the reading, whatever you want. Now, the notes that you take or the way that you take notes will depend on where you take the test. You should know this. So I don't know if you guys know yet, but if you guys are planning on taking the test at home, you can actually take your notes in normal paper. You will have to take your notes on a whiteboard or using a transparent sheet. Okay? And you have to take your notes using a water marker so that you can erase them with a piece of clothing or anything. Okay? That's if you take the test at home. But if you take the test in a test center, then you'll be able to take your notes in normal paper with a pen. Okay, so why am I saying this? If you guys already know where you're gonna take the test, it's really important that you practice realistically. That means that you practice in the same way that you will take the actual test. So those of you guys who are taking the test at home, this is mostly for you. If you know that you will take the test at home, then you better start practicing taking notes that way because it's different. The experience is different. I think that it may be a little bit more uncomfortable to take notes in a whiteboard or anything with a marker, but you need to get used to that if you're taking the test at home. Okay, so think about that. Obviously, right now I'm not gonna like ask you guys to have a whiteboard, but I am talking for the future. Right now, I mean in the future, try to start practicing already the way that you will take your notes. Is that okay? Any questions about that? Okay, guys. Then I'm going to play the lecture and I want you guys to just take notes and pay attention. Then we'll talk about it.
Listen to part of a lecture in a business class.
If a consumer has to choose between two products, what determines the choice? Assume that someone, a purchaser, is choosing between two products that cost the same, okay? If people have a choice between two identically priced products, which one will they choose? They choose the one they think is of higher quality, of course. But what does it mean for a product to be a high-quality product? Well, business analysts usually speak of two major factors of quality. One factor is reliability, and the other is what we call features. So reliability. What's reliability? Well, a product is reliable if it works the way we expect it to work, if it can go a reasonable amount of time without needing repairs. If a product, a car for example, doesn't work the way it should and needs repairs too soon, we say it's unreliable. So product reliability means basically the absence of defects or problems that you weren't expecting. It used to be that when people thought about product quality, they thought mainly about reliability. Today, it's different. People do still care about reliability, don't get me wrong. It's just that manufacturing standards are now so high that, we'll take cars for example, today. Today's cars are very reliable. So reliability is important, but it's not going to be the deciding factor. So if reliability isn't the deciding factor anymore, what is? Features. All those extras, the things a product has that aren't really necessary, but that make it easier to use or that make it cool. For example, new cars today are loaded with features like electric windows, sunroofs, air conditioning, stereos, and so forth. When people are comparing products today, they look at features because reliability is pretty much equal across the board. And that's why manufacturers include so many features in their products.
Using points and examples from the lecture, explain the two major factors of product quality and how their role in consumer decision-making has changed.
Okay, guys, that was the lecture. Now, can you tell me a little bit about what it was about? What was the lecture about? Pamela, what could you say? What was the lecture about?
Well, it was about in a business class and was about the choices that the consumers made when they have to buy a product. And they put the situation that is two products, but they are with the same cost. So the price is not the problem there. And it talks about two major factors that are related to higher quality, reliability, and features.
Okay, perfect, Pamela. Thank you so much. So I guess that's a pretty good summary of the lecture. We're gonna go here. Give me a second. Okay. So yes, first of all, what I want you guys to do, one thing that I actually forgot to say, is when you start listening to the lecture and when you start taking notes, I don't want you guys to take any notes from the introduction of the lecture. You probably know and you realize that there was an introduction in the beginning, right? There was an introduction where the professor talks mainly about the topic in general, right? And in this introduction, the professor mentioned everything that Pamela said, right? So how a consumer decides what product to buy when you have two products that are cost the same and the price is not the problem. So you just want to go for the product that has the higher quality. So how do you decide? That was the introduction, right? The topic. So when you guys are listening to the topic, I don't want you guys to take any notes. Just pay attention and try to understand what it is about. Now, as soon as you finish listening to the lecture, you get the question, the way that you did here. And this was the question, right? It says, using points and examples from the lecture, explain the two major factors of product quality. What happens is you will always have the topic, a summary of the topic, or like a title in the question. So I want you all to use the question. Remember that when you're speaking, what you will see on your screen is the question and the timer. So you need to make a good use of both of them. So what I want you to do as soon as you finish listening is read the question. Don't ever skip the question because here you have the topic. This was the topic of the lecture. The lecture was about two major factors of product quality. That is the topic, right? And what happens is later when you have to speak, you're going to have to mention what the lecture was about first in your introduction. And I don't want you guys to try to summarize the introduction because it can be too long and it can be difficult to summarize all of that information. And it's very common that students waste a lot of time just summarizing what the lecture was about. And I don't want you guys to do that mistake. So what we're going to do is you are not going to take any notes from the introduction. You're just going to pay attention. And when you get the question, you need to read it. And this will be the topic. What do you have in the question after the word explain? That is the topic. If you want, you can write it down on your notes. But it's not necessary because the question will be there. So you can always read when you're speaking. okay? But I wanted to say that as well. Don't take any notes from the introduction. You will use the question when you speak. So here in our notes, I'm gonna say the question was about the two major factors of product quality. Okay, guys. So Pamela already said it. The first factor was reliability, right? The first factor that influences or that is related to the product, the quality of product. And the second was features. We already have the two of them. Now, can anyone tell me what reliability is? What is reliability? What does that mean? According to the lecture, right?
Don't need to repair.
Exactly. Great. When a product doesn't need repairs, right? I think it's when a product doesn't have defects, right? Is that okay? Anything else that you guys can say for reliability? What was reliability? The professor gave a couple of definitions, right? Another definition the professor gave was when the product works the way that the consumer expects it to work, right? That was another definition. I think we have two definitions for the same concept, reliability. So reliability is the absence of defects in a product or when the product works the way that it's expected by the consumer. That is reliability. Now, you guys can have two definitions. You just need one. So you don't necessarily have to take notes on the two definitions that you have here. You just need one. Now, we also had an example for reliability, right? This concept was illustrated with an example. So can you tell me what the example was about? What was the example? The professor talked about cars, right? And the professor said that a car will be reliable when it doesn't need repairs, as Louis said, when it doesn't need repairs too soon after buying the product. Is that okay? Do you guys have anything to add here in the first factor? Another thing the professor says that may not be too important, but it's also something that she says, is that reliability is not the deciding factor anymore, right? So reliability is important, but it's not the major factor, the deciding factor anymore. It used to be, but it's not anymore. And if it's not, then the deciding factor now is features. So what is features? What can you guys tell me?
Is the extras of a product.
Exactly. Anything else? They make the product attractive, right? They make the product cooler, I think the professor says, or easier to use. Okay, good. And this is the deciding factor. Now, we're gonna also write that down. Now, we also had another example for features. So what was the example? Can you guys tell me? It was also about cars, right? The professor gave some examples of the features that cars can have. Do you remember what those features were? The professor mentions automatic electric windows, air conditioning, I think, stereos. I don't know what else was mentioned. Do you guys remember? What do you have on your notes? Sunroof? Okay, those were a couple of them. Okay, but the professor gives examples of the features that a car can have. Do you agree with me that this is kind of like the structure of the lecture? This is what we had? Yes, right? It is. So this is exactly how every lecture will be in this question. It will always have the same structure. You have the topic in the introduction, and that topic is always going to be broken down into two different subtopics. So that's what the S stands for, subtopic. Subtopic 1, subtopic 2, and each subtopic has its own example. So in summary, in the lecture for this question, you will always have the topic, two subtopics, and two examples, one for each subtopic. It's always going to be like this. It's never going to change. Okay, guys? And this helps you a lot because you already know what you're looking for. You know that when you're listening to this lecture, you want to hear the subtopics and the examples. You need to take notes on the subtopics and the examples. That is the most important part. The topic, as I said before, the introduction is not important because you will have that in the question. So your focus should be on catching the subtopics and the examples. But it's always like this. Is that okay? Do you guys have any questions so far? Okay, awesome. So then you get the question, right? Using points and examples from the lecture, explain two major factors of product quality. As I said before, first you have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. During this time, what you guys are gonna do is completely up to you. It depends on what you need, and I will be talking about this when we are working on your speaking sessions. So I will be telling you individually, I will be giving you some tips to each one of you guys. But in general, it depends. So for example, in my case, when I was preparing and taking the exam, one of the problems that I had with the speaking section was that I take many notes, to be honest, and I can write very fast. So I don't know, I guess that's why I take so many notes. And then when was speaking during these 60 seconds, I used to run out of time a lot because I wanted to say everything that I had on my notes. I wanted to mention every detail, every single thing. So what I did was during this preparation time, I would work on my notes. So I would start crossing out the things that I wouldn't consider were relevant, that I didn't need to mention in the response. I would circle the things that matter the most, the things that I needed to mention. So I just organized and worked on my notes during this preparation time. That's something that you guys can do if you feel that you're struggling with time and it's because of your notes. Another thing some students do is they start rehearsing the response. So they start speaking already. And then they obviously start again, you know? But that's especially good for students who have problems just articulating the words, putting together the words, and coming up with good sentences. If that's your problem, then it does help to start rehearsing certain parts of your response. And there are so many other options, you know, so many other things. Some students don't do anything. They just sit there in blank without doing anything, absolutely anything. And that helps them to relax if you're too nervous. So it depends on what you need to do. But you can do whatever you want. That time won't be recorded, right? They won't evaluate anything that you do there. What matters is what you do during these 60 seconds. So let's see what to do when you need to start speaking. Let's see how to speak. We are gonna use this template. A template is just a guide. It's like a script that you guys need to use at least in the beginning. Tomorrow you're gonna be practicing and you guys need to use this template to practice. So what we're gonna do, how many seconds do we have to speak? Anyone?
60.
Yeah, we have 60 seconds, 1 minute. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna spend only 10 seconds of our 60 in a short, brief, quick introduction. And in your introduction, what you guys need to do is talk about the topic, summarize the entire lecture. Now remember that I told you not to take notes. So what you're gonna say, what you're gonna do here is read the question. The question will be on your screen, so you just have to read it there. In this case, for example, you will say, the lecture discusses, and you read, the two major factors of product quality. You always read the question, okay? The lecture discusses the two major factors of product quality. That's it. That's everything you need to do in your introduction. 10 seconds is more than enough. This is the limit, right? Of course, you can do less than this, but 10 seconds is the limit for your introduction. The word discuss, the verb discuss, does not need any preposition. So please don't say discuss about. This about is incorrect. Okay, I don't want to hear you guys saying about. And after that is done, your introduction is good, you need to start explaining the two subtopics. So you just explain them the way that you want, you know, in the most summarized way you can. So the only thing that you need to consider is that in your responses, first thing is you need transitions. You need to connect your ideas in a way, right? Because if they're not connected, if they're just mixed, then it won't have a good structure. So you need to connect your ideas. We talked about this before. How do you do that? By using transitions. So in order to introduce the first subtopic, you will say first, or to start, to begin with, whatever transition you want, but you need to have a transition. To give the example, you will say, for example, for instance, to illustrate, to exemplify, whatever you want, but you need a transition. To move on to the next subtopic, you need a transition word. You can say furthermore, moreover, plus, besides, also, then, whatever you want. Then you need another transition for the second example. So to illustrate, for example, for instance, whatever you want. You need those transitions. Second thing that you guys need is you need to use reporting verbs. What are reporting verbs? Remember that these are not your ideas, right? You don't know any of this. You're just summarizing what the professor said. So you can take the credit. You can just say, imagine that this is my response, and I just say, so there are two major factors of product quality. The first one is reliability, which is basically the absence of defects in a product. So for example, I can give the example of cars. If you do that, then it's like those were your ideas, right? You're taking the credit. You can't do that. You need to summarize what the professor says. So you need to tell me, the professor says that there are two factors of reliability, of product quality. The professor explains that reliability is this and that. The professor gives the example of cars. So you need to use those reporting verbs to make sure that you're giving the professor credit. Okay, that's really important. So just use the template and it'll be okay. You have everything you need here. Remember to conjugate the verbs correctly. Explains, goes, gives. And one thing that I also forgot, as soon as you guys hear the professor speak, you will know if it's female or male, right? You will notice. So as soon as you identify the gender of the professor, please write down the pronoun in big capital letters, she or he, so that you guys don't get confused. Because it's really easy to get confused with the pronouns and then start mixing them or just not remember what the pronoun was. So please, as soon as you hear the professor speak, write it down so that you don't forget and you're able to see that when you're speaking. Okay, that's also very important. So Is that okay so far? Do you guys have any questions about this? Do you need a conclusion? No, you don't need a conclusion. If you have extra time, if you have finished your response and you still have 10 seconds per se, you can go with a short conclusion. You can say, in summary, or these are the two major factors of product quality according to the lecture, for example, right? Or in conclusion, the professor discusses these two major factors, I don't know, comparing them and contrasting them. You can do that if you have extra time, but it's completely unnecessary. They won't evaluate or they won't give you any extra points or anything. Okay, guys? Any other question? Okay. So I am gonna give you guys a sample response. I will do it, I will try so that you see how I organize my time, the things that I say, the things that I leave behind, how I speak, how I use the template. I don't know. You can see whatever you want. You can evaluate me based on the rubrics that we saw as well, right? So let's see. I'm gonna set the timer for 1 minute. Okay, here we go. The lecture discusses the two major factors of product quality and their role in consumer decision making. First, the professor explains reliability, which is the first main factor. The professor explains that reliability is the absence of defects in a product or when the product meets the consumer's expectations. For instance, we see the example of cars. According to the professor, a car is said to be reliable when it works the way it should, when it doesn't need to be repaired too soon after buying the car. Then she goes on to explain features, the second factor. She explains that features is now the deciding factor. It used to be reliability, but now it's features. Features are all those extra characteristics that a product has that are not necessary but that make the product appealing. She gives the example of cars again and mentions air conditioning, electric windows, and sunroofs as examples. Right? So that could be an example. It wasn't perfect. I think I needed some more time, but I tried to hide that, right? I tried to finish the response with the time that I had. And that's something that you guys are gonna learn. You're gonna learn to improvise, you're gonna learn to accommodate your response to the time that you have. It's really important that you do that and that you don't make it look like you are being cut off. So I tried to follow the timelines. So 10 seconds for the introduction, 25 for the first subtopic, and 25 for the second. I used reporting verbs. I gave the details for the examples. And that's it, right? That's pretty much it. So what do you guys think now? Now that you've also heard my response, what do you think? What questions do you have, comments? Nothing really? Everything is clear? Okay, guys, so one more thing that I wanted to talk about. Well, actually, there are many things I want to talk about, but one thing first, and that's the topics. Remember, I was telling you, I will tell you what the topics are. So, I mean, this is great because you are prepared, you know what to expect. In this question specifically, you guys, 90% of the time, you will have one of these three topics. psychology, biology, or business? Psychology is pretty much related to how our brain works. So it is related to how our memory works, how we deal with certain experiences, how we process pain, how we process our emotions, how we learn, how we interact with each other, how we relate to each other, all of that related to behaviors and anything that you can think of related to psychology. Biology is never going to be human biology for starters, but you do have animals and plants. So they talk about how they organize, how their life processes are, how they relate to each other as well, how they have evolved, how they have adapted to certain changes, to certain environment conditions, and to certain things. And finally, you have business, which is mostly going to be just marketing techniques, advertising strategies, pricing, um, I don't know, designs for the containers. So it's something simple, you know, it's never going to be like hardcore economics or anything. And that's 90% of the time. You get psychology, biology, and business. But there's obviously a small chance that you can get something different. So there's a chance that you can get something related to the arts, to history, literature, sociology, theology, sociobiology, and many other topics. But to be honest, that's not too common. I have seen a couple of art topics, history a little bit, sociology. Well, I think the ones that are mentioned there are the most common ones, but it's very rare. You know, it's just 10% of the time. So to be honest, I don't think you'll get something like that. But in case you do, you will be prepared. Don't worry, we'll practice. Now, why am I telling you this? How is this important? Why do you care? As you know, the one that we did was for business, right? And you do need some certain vocabulary because they're going to talk about consumer choices. What happens if you don't know what consumer is? You won't understand, right? Or you won't be able to use the word when you're speaking and you will say people instead of consumers. So what happens is you need some vocabulary related to these topics and you need to expand your vocabulary. I am gonna send you guys to your WhatsApp, well, to our group chat, um, as a word list containing like expressions for these topics. But to be honest, the best way that you're gonna learn, and I think I was saying this yesterday, is by listening to content and reading content. So read psychology articles, read I don't know, biology research projects, listen to business podcasts. You can watch National Geographic videos for biology. You can watch TED Talks, TED Education for psychology. So that is actually how you're gonna learn and expand your vocabulary on these things, not by memorizing words. Okay, so I just wanted to say that you know the topics, so you know what vocabulary you should be looking for. It is important that you do learn, that you do expand your vocabulary in these areas because it helps. I know that it helps because, like, for example, when I have students that are, I remember I had this, I had a student and she was, I don't know what, I think she was, I don't remember her major, but she was doing something biology related. And she was really good at biology topics, but she wasn't so good at business or psychology, for example. And I had other students who were like, I don't know, who studied something related to business, so business administration, marketing, and they were really good with business topics, but they weren't so good with biology. And the reason why that was happening is mainly because of the vocabulary. So it's important that you guys learn vocabulary on these topics. Okay? So that's what I wanted to say. And I think that's going to be it for today. What questions do you guys have now? Don't worry about practicing. Tomorrow we're going to dedicate to practicing. You guys are going to practice. You're going to answer questions. But what questions do you have for today? No questions? Everything's really clear? Okay, guys, then that will be it for today's class. Please, before you go, don't forget today's daily survey. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Then I will see you all tomorrow.
Bye, Miss.
Bye.
Okay, bye, miss.
Bye.